For sure. So let's talk about the SEC, your East and West projections, Phil. You have Georgia winning the SEC East, and you have Alabama winning the West. I think no surprise there. But Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina finishing 5th, Missouri 6th, and Vanderbilt 7th. Really quickly, we'll start with the East. Just sort of give your rundown on why you have those picks that way, how you see it finishing out. And again, I'd love to know your reasoning for Georgia because I know a lot of people are picking Florida this year. I was joking with somebody else. I feel like they're kind of the sexy pick, which makes me want to pick Georgia even more because normally it's kind of like a gambling trick. When the public is going one way, you normally go the other. But just talk about really quickly your SEC East projections, why you have the Gamecocks fitting in 5th, and I guess just how you see it shaking out.
Yeah, and I think with Florida being picked first by most, and I think they'll be number one by the SEC media as well, it probably comes back to they have a returning starting quarterback, and they have the better schedule as well. Florida only has 3 true SEC road games this year. Meanwhile, Georgia only has 3 true SEC home games. Florida gets LSU at home. We know LSU's not going to be as good as last year. Georgia has to play Alabama on the road. But, add it all up, I'm a defensive guy, Chris, and so I think Georgia might have the best defense in the country. They have a number 5 rated D-line, number 1 set of linebackers, number 4 DBs. And while they lose their quarterback, I mean, we're talking Jamie Newman, who was exceptional at Wake Forest last year, and JT Daniels from USC. They're in good shape there. Zamir White's a guy who was my number 1 rated running back out of high school. He's coming in this year a year removed from his knee injury. I think he'll have a big year this year. And then the receiving core last year was extremely inexperienced. Now they're experienced. Biggest question mark for them is the offensive line. For Florida, there are some questions that I have, but I mean, they're a good team. They do lose their top running back from last year. 2 of the top 3 receivers, offensive line, returns 4 starters. I think Florida's a good team, but I still went with Georgia to win it. But I think Florida's right up there. Talent-wise, they rank in my top units in all 8 positions. Jeremy Pruitt's done a great job at Tennessee. You go back to his first year, they lost 6 games by 25-plus points. Last year, they won their last 6 games, got to a bowl. When I talked to Coach Pruitt this year, he feels they can play with anybody on their schedule. After I mentioned you're playing Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, he's like, we can play with anybody. He likes the talent, much deeper on both the offense and defensive lines. And in fact, the first year I talked to them, they had 8 scholarship offensive linemen. They have 16 now. Defensively, they had 5 scholarship defensive linemen when he got there. They're up to 10 deep on the D-line. So this is a much better Tennessee team. Kentucky was extremely young last year. 4 returning starters on offense, 4 on defense. You expected a big step back. They still got to 8-5. Now, 15 returning starters, and they did it last year. Eddie Grand did a great job with that offense. I mean, they were putting up points despite the fact you knew they weren't going to throw the football. They had a wide receiver in Lynn Bowden at QB, and they had a dangerous running game. But now they have a quarterback in Terry Wilson that can throw. I like the offensive line led by Drake Jackson, Kennard, and Young. And defensively, they're going to have some teeth this year. It's a lot more veteran unit. So I think Kentucky deserves to be up there as well. We talked in length about South Carolina, and then we talked a little bit about Missouri. I think if you're first-year head coach, if there's a year you don't want to be a first-year head coach, it's this year. Limited spring practices, first-year head coach trying to learn your players. He only had 3 spring practices to learn his new team, and they're an inexperienced group with only 11 returning starters. And then Vanderbilt, their defense is going to be good. I have a lot of question marks about their offense. So, can Vandy move up? Yeah, if their defense plays like it did 3 years ago, but this same group last year allowed 437 yards per game, so you wonder how much they can improve. Right. And that's why I make it a tradition. I usually pick Vandy last in the East.
For sure. Moving over to the West seems like the juggernaut that it always is, Phil. You have Bama in your preseason top 25. You have Bama 3rd, Texas A&M 5th, LSU 6th, Auburn 19th. So the SEC West has some absolute fangs this year. And, oh, by the way, LSU is the reigning national champion. But you have Alabama winning the SEC West, Texas A&M 2nd, LSU 3rd, Auburn 4th, Ole Miss 5th, Mississippi State 6th, and Arkansas 7th. Just kind of run down that list. Why you pick Bama? Again, I know LSU loses a lot, but Bama winning the SEC West, I think it's a smart pick. I think you don't get rich betting against Alabama. But I know the one that stuck out to me, you have Texas A&M 5th in the preseason top 25. Just break down the West, but I'll be very intrigued to hear your thoughts on Texas A&M for sure, which is on the Gamecock schedule.
Yeah, what a disaster last year was for Alabama. They finished 8th in the country. I don't know how they're going to ever overcome that.
I did see that. I did. I was just going to say, I did see that you said last year a quote unquote disastrous number 8. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, and this year, last year they lost Dylan Moses, an All-American linebacker, prior to the season. Joshua McMillan, their other projected starter, prior to the season. They had to play a couple of true freshmen at linebacker. Those two freshmen are now sophomores. They get Moses back. They get McMillan back. They had 2 freshmen on the defensive line. Those guys are back. It's going to be your typical Alabama defense. And offensively, I rate their offensive line number 1 in the country, and I'm on the Joe Moore Award Committee. I bounced it off those guys. Nobody blinked an eye. They said, yep, we could see it. The best offensive line in the country. That's a good place to start. Najee Harris in the backfield with Trey Sanders, a couple of my number 1 rated running backs out of high school. Waddle and Devontae Smith, the receiver. Who's going to be the quarterback? Doesn't matter. Mac Jones is solid. Bryce Young might just win the job. We'll see what happens there. But, yeah, it's your typical Alabama team. And how do you pick against Alabama? They always reload. And with Texas A&M, last year when I talked to Coach Jimbo Fisher, 2 things stood out to me. One was their brutal schedule, and as it was, they played 3 number 1 ranked teams in the country, the number 4 team and the number 8 team. And then the other thing that stood out was the lack of seniors that they had on the roster. So I told Coach Fisher last year, I go, Coach, I'm going to put you on my national cover next year. And this year, the schedule's easier. It's number 66 in the country. They may only face 1 top 10 team as opposed to the 5 they took on last year, including 3 number 1s. And they've got 17 returning starters, including a veteran senior quarterback in Kellen Mond. The defense is loaded with my number 12 D-line, number 9 linebackers, number 6 DBs. So that's why I've got A&M up that high. They do have to go to Tuscaloosa and come out with a win to win the West this year. LSU is in the reload category. They're going to be good, but when you lose 14 players the NFL and 20 players overall, 6 signed you have undrafted free agent contracts, they only have 8 returning starters. They lose their quarterback. I think they take a little step back. Auburn's got a tough schedule this year, and they dropped from number 59 on my experience chart to number 100. My biggest question mark is the offensive line, which loses all 5 starters this year. But this Auburn, they're going to be good. They reload. Of the bottom half, I think Mississippi's got the best chance to do something. They had a lot of young talent that last year, a lot of freshmen, and I think Lane Kiffin steps into a pretty good situation there.
For sure. So give me your SEC champion. If I missed it, I apologize. But your playoff projections and who you have winning the whole thing.
Yeah, I went way out on a limb here, Chris. I went with Alabama winning the SEC, Ohio State winning the Big Ten, Clemson winning the ACC, and then Oklahoma winning the Big 12. And for the title game, I went Ohio State and Clemson, and I've got Ohio State winning it all. I think they've got the fewest question marks of the big boys this year.